Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the difference between individual targeting and professional targeting. So professional targeting is you're targeting a job instead of the person. So instead of targeting me as Dr. Sarah Eastland, you're targeting me as English professor. Individual targeting, on the other hand, is targeting the specific person. So this would be targeting me as Dr. Sarah Eastland rather than targeting me as generic English professor. So let's talk about how this will work a little bit. When you have much less power in the relationship, it's usually wiser to professionally target because it's better to stay formal until you can be informal. When you're not as sure about the information that you've gathered, it's a good idea to be more professional because being individual can be very informal and it might offend your audience. When the stakes are super high, you also want to do professional targeting because it's often considered more formal or more professional. When you have about the same amount of power, or even if you have more power, individual targeting might be a good idea because you have the dynamic and relationship to be able to do that. When you're more interested in your audience as a person, you want to target them as individuals because that way they know that you're more interested in them as an individual. And when you've collected the data by yourself, so you're relatively sure of it, maybe individual targeting would be a better idea at that point. So how would this look if we apply it? So if we're talking about, we don't talk about Bruno, and if this audience was me, then this is how different attention getters look. So if you're doing professional targeting of me, teachers can be one of the most powerful tools for helping save the world, especially the liminal. People go into the helping professions because they want to help students such as Bruno and Encanto. Okay, so remember the attention getter is connecting the subject to the audience. So we've got Bruno, and the entire paper is about, we don't talk about Bruno and me. So I've got the subject in there. I've got liminal in there, which is actually one of my topics. You don't need your topics in your attention getter, but if you can pull it off, go for it. Liminal is also a professional targeting word because it is very much an academic word. And so if you're targeting me as an English professor, you can not only assume that I have vocabulary like liminal, but that it is appropriate to use vocabulary like that with me. In terms of targeting my profession, so we're referring to teachers and helping professions and students. So obviously that's the professional part of the targeting. Almost every teacher goes into teaching to help save the world or to make the world better or something generic like that. So having that kind of super generic English teacher or educator approach is not necessarily a bad idea if you're professionally targeting. So if you notice, none of this is about me specifically. This is all about me as an English teacher. This would be an acceptable attention getter for almost any English professor, probably not English high school teachers because of the word liminal, but it's possible. It depends on your high school teacher. All right, what would it look like if we were doing individual targeting? If you were targeting me as a human, me as Dr. Sarah Eastland, not me as generic English professor, the song you are humming has been stuck in your head for months. Before it drives you completely insane, remember that We Don't Talk About Bruno definitely has a moral to the story for your students and you. Okay, so the attention getter connects the subject to the audience. We've got the subject. You are humming for months. Okay, so I have made a comment about this a couple times in class that I have had this stuck in my head for months and months. And so if you are going to be repeating language back to me that I have mentioned, that's a great way to target me specifically because it means that you paid attention to what I said and better yet, you retained what I said. Before it drives you completely insane. Okay, so this is a tone thing. This has to do with the fact that you gauged me as a person and you decided that my personality is relatively informal and that I've got a relatively decent sense of humor. So you can use slightly more informal language and teasing language before it drives you completely insane. So that's kind of playful teasing language. Moral to the story. I hadn't realized it, but apparently I say this all the time with everything. And so again, not only are we attaching the "we don't talk about Bruno" as a subject to the audience, we're also bringing up the fact to the audience that you're paying attention to what I say and you're repeating it and remembering it. For your students and you, so again, you've got second person you. Remember, I'm the only person in the audience, so every time you use second person, you're talking to me and me alone. So there are the two different versions of an attention getter, one that's targeting me as an individual and one that's targeting me as a professional. I hope that helps.